Chapter 10, Part 2. Papa was right when he said that in a day or two I'd be as good as new. On the morning of the second day, I crawled out of bed, feeling almost like my old self again. Oh, I was still a little nervous and a bit wobbly on my feet, but otherwise I felt pretty good. As I walked into the kitchen, the family was just sitting down to the breakfast table. Papa and Daisy started whooping and clapping their hands like they hadn't seen me for 10 years. I knew they were kidding me, so I grinned, sat down, and helped myself to a double portion of everything on the table. Eyeing my loaded plate, Papa smiled and said, "When a fellow starts eating like that, he sure isn't sick." "Oh, I feel pretty good now, Papa," I said. Right away, Mama started laying the law down to me about my drinking. She told me that if I ever did anything like that again, I could just pack my clothes and leave, and I could take that drunken old hound dog with me when I left. Daisy giggled and said, "Mama, if Jay Barry does leave home, he won't have to do much packing. Those monkeys got away with about everything he owns. Why, they even got away with his breeches this time." I wanted to argue with Mama and Daisy, but I realized that I didn't have a leg to stand on. So I just sat there, mad all over, hating monkeys and more determined than ever to catch every last one of them, if it took me until Gabriel blew his horn. Mama said, "I guess I'll just have to stop my work and make you another pair of breeches." Papa laughed and said, "Looks like I'm going to be minus another pair of my overalls." Overalls in our family really got a good wearing out. Mama made mine from the backs of the ones that Papa wore. Papa wore out the front and I wore out the back. "Jay Barry," Daisy said, "old Rowdy's in pretty good shape now. I finally got him to drink some warm milk, and I gave him a good cold bath in the watering trough." As soon as I had eaten my breakfast, I went out to the barn lot, and sure enough, there was Rowdy just lying on the ground and looking as if he didn't have a friend left in the world. I walked over and patted my old dog on his head and said, "I know how you feel, boy. In fact, I don't see how you made it with Daisy messing with you." Rowdy was so sad he couldn't even wag his tail. "Come on, boy," I coaxed. "I'm going to the store to have another talk with Grandpa about those monkeys, and he might give you a meat rind." That was all it took to get him to come with me. On my way to the store, I stopped to watch a sight that all but left me breathless. To my right, far up on a hillside, there was a loud gobbling and a beating of heavy wings. Then up out of that green blanket and into the sky rose a flock of wild turkeys. I blinked my eyes at the burst of fiery bronze as they winged their way through the bright rays of the morning sun. Rowdy and I watched until they faded from sight in the thick timber of the river bottoms. "Boy, Rowdy," I said, "wasn't that something to see? You just wait until I get that gun. We'll have an old gobbler on the kitchen table for breakfast, dinner, and supper every day until I'm old and gray-headed." Uh, we'll make this the chapter 10, part 2 question. Breakfast, dinner, and supper. This is more of a southern thing. Dinner is what we call lunch, and supper is what we call dinner. So the question was, let's see, what is dinner in the South? And the answer is supper. All right. A little farther along, just as Rowdy and I rounded a bend in the road, I stopped and stared in wonderment at the sight directly ahead. Here and there on the long sloping hillside, milky white splotches stood out like spilt buckets of milk in the deep green. The Ozarks' most beautiful flowers, the dogwoods, were in full bloom. Mixed in with the green and white, the deep glare of redbuds gleamed like railroad flares in the dewy morning. As I stood there drinking in all that beauty, I said, "Rowdy, Daisy says that the old man in the mountains is taking care of everything in the hills. If he is, he must have worked a long time painting that picture." I'd been so busy looking at all the Ozark beauty, I'd forgotten about the monkeys. When I did think about them, I said, "Holy smokes, Rowdy, we better stop this gawking around and get on to the store. Grandpa will think that we're never coming." To make up for lost time, I started off in a dog trot. Grandpa wasn't in the store when Rowdy and I arrived, but I knew that he was around somewhere because the door was wide open. Then I heard a loud banging coming from the barn. I walked over and found him putting a new spoke in one of his buckboard wheels. As Rowdy and I walked up, Grandpa smiled and said, "Hi." "Hi, Grandpa," I said. With a sly look on his friendly old face, Grandpa looked all around, and then leaning over close to me, he whispered, "I've got a jug hid there in the corn crib. Would you care for a little drink?" I knew that Grandpa was kidding me, so I grinned and said, Grandpa, you know I'm not a drinking man." Grandpa said, "Well, I didn't think you were, but your papa told me that you and Rowdy got on a pretty good tutor." "I guess we did, Grandpa," I said, "but it wasn't our fault. That Jimbo monkey got us drunk. It seemed like every time we get close to those monkeys, they make fools of us. Why, they even stole my breeches this time, and I never will live that down." Grandpa exploded in laughter. He laughed and he laughed. He laughed so hard that great big tears boiled out of his eyes and ran all over his face. I even laughed a little myself, but I wasn't laughing about losing my britches. I was laughing at Grandpa. Rowdy thought that because Grandpa and I were laughing, we were happy, and so he got happy too. He wiggled and twisted all over the place. Grandpa finally got over his laughing spell and reached for his old red handkerchief. He took off his glasses, wiped them, and then blew his nose. Now that we've had a good laugh, he said, I think it's time we started thinking about catching those monkeys. We can't let them get away with stealing a fellow's britches. Grandpa, I said, I haven't done anything but think about those monkeys, and my thinker is just about wore out. I don't know what to do now. I've tried everything from A to Z, and I haven't caught one yet. Well, I don't think we've tried everything yet, Grandpa said. There's a lot of space between A and Z. Now here's what you do. You go on home and be ready about daybreak in the morning. I'll come by in my buckboard and we'll make a trip into town. I was really surprised to hear that we were going to town because I didn't get to go to town but about once in every so long. What are we going to town for, Grandpa? I asked. We're going to find out how to catch those monkeys, Grandpa said. That's what we're going for. Grandpa, I asked all interested, do you know someone in town that knows how to catch monkeys? No, Grandpa said, shaking his head. I don't believe I know of any monkey catchers in town, but I think there's a place where we can find out something. What kind of a place is that, Grandpa? I asked. The library, Grandpa said. I thought a second and said, oh, I know now. That's the place you were telling me about where they have all those books, thousands and thousands of books. That's the place, Grandpa said. I don't care what kind of a problem a man has, he can always find the answer to it in the library. Somewhere in one of those books, we'll find the answer to our monkey catching problem. Boy, Grandpa, I said, we should have thought about this library a long time ago. Sure would have saved a lot of wear and tear on Rowdy and me. Grandpa looked at me, then he looked at Rowdy. Smiling, he said, I can't see any wear and tear anywhere. You both look like you're in pretty good shape to me. Rowdy had seen Grandpa looking at me and figured this was as good a time as any to let his wants be known. His old tail started thumping the ground, then he opened his mouth and let out a bawl that scared the chickens out of the barn. Grandpa said, what was that all about, boy? Rowdy whined, turned, and bounded for the store. On reaching the porch, he stopped, looked back at us, and bawled again. Frowning and looking surprised, Grandpa said, what's gotten into him? I couldn't help chuckling a little, for I knew what Rowdy was trying to tell Grandpa. Oh, Grandpa, I said, don't pay any attention to him. He just wants a meat rind. Watching Rowdy bouncing up and down on the porch, Grandpa said, he seems to know where the meat rinds are, all right. Maybe we better get him one before he has a nervous breakdown. Rowdy wound up with a big fat meat rind, and I got my usual sack of candy. I thanked Grandpa and told him that he wouldn't have to wait for me in the morning, that I would be ready and waiting. End of chapter 10.